Our first topic for today, and where we're going to start, is, I think, a big one that a lot of people in the audience have been thinking about, focusing on in various ways. And as we do get into the topic, actually, one of the things I wanted to do quickly is just do a rapid poll of the audience. So if you are working in a B2B organization, can you raise your hand, please? Okay. All right, and B2C? Okay. Something else, governmental organization, other types of groups? Okay. And in terms of your daily role, if you focus on marketing and communications in your daily role, can you raise your hand, please? Okay. What about customer-centric roles? So focus just on customer care, customer sorts of things. Okay. And other categories? There's lots of other categories. No. Okay. Embarrassed to admit it? Maybe? Okay. All right, so our topic for the first session is going to be a customer-centric future. A lot of companies talk about being customer-centric. In fact, a lot of companies have different definitions of what that means to be customer-centric. We're going to dig into some of those things. We're going to dig into some of the challenges, some of the opportunities, and everybody on the panel is going to share some insights on how they approach that. So what we thought we'd do is give everyone a chance to introduce themselves briefly, and then I'll start to direct some questions, and we'll have a discussion around the topic. So Claire, you're on the hot seat because you're first, so maybe you can introduce yourself first, and then we'll let everyone else go.
Sure. I'm Claire Burns, and I'm the Chief Customer Officer at MetLife. We are a multinational insurer, 90 million customers, 65,000 employees. We operate in 54 countries, and we're B2B and B2C.
Morning, my name's Paula Keve. I'm the Chief Communications Officer of Dow Jones. Dow Jones, for those of you that don't know, owns the Wall Street Journal and also an institutional business with a product called DJX, which has just launched. I joined about just over a year ago from BNP Paribas, from a French investment bank, and prior to that I worked for Bloomberg and did a few other things.
I'm Nikki Briggs. I'm the Chief Communications Officer at Chobani. When I joined Chobani in 2009, we had about 50 employees, and today we're over 3,000 people strong. We've grown incredibly quickly, and I think amidst that growth, our DNA has really been rooted in digital and customer centricity. So it's great to be here today. We've become the country's #1 selling Greek yogurt, and I think really a catalyst for a lot of positive change in food.
Hi, I'm Justin Reilly. I head up digital strategy, product, and innovation at Arke Systems, which is a marketing technology firm out of Atlanta. My background is in lead generation and started a few companies, failed at a few companies. So most of what I'll be talking about is probably through the marketing technology data lens. So if I get too data geeky, someone stop me.
I'll be happy to stop you. All right, so Claire, you're one of the people on the panel, probably the only person who's got a customer-centric title, Chief Customer Officer. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about, what does that mean? What does your day look like to be that?
Okay, sure. MetLife decided a couple of years ago, we got a new CEO, and he decided that the legacy that he wanted to leave to the company was to become customer-centric and to transform our company from what's essentially been a very product-centric culture to one that's focused on customers. And so he, at that time, was looking for someone to lead that effort and asked me if I would be interested in doing that. So I took on the role, and it's been a new role for me it's been a role for a couple of years now. But,
when you took that role and he said that, I mean, did you know in your head what that meant?
No, I had no
it sounds
idea
like a big thing.
So
yeah.
I did do quite a bit of investigation into how other companies were approaching this and where companies have been successful and how they had gone about doing it. And so it was a bit of an exploration and discovery to get to a strategy and a roadmap and where we are, but it's been a lot of fun.
And what was one of the in that beginning moment when CEO comes, he says, "I want you to do this big broad thing," and now I'm out of here. What's the first thing that you do with that? I mean, do you go and talk to customers? Do you kind of talk to people internally? I mean, what's some of the first things that you have to do to get your mind around something as big as that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what I did, I talked to customers, I talked to business leaders, I talked to our agents and our distributors, and I talked to other companies that had been successful. I talked to consulting firms. Bain is one that spends a lot of time focused on this, and found out basically the roadmap that companies there's only a handful of companies that have successfully transformed a business as old as ours in that way. So I tried to get a sense of what are the key elements of success and how to approach it, and it was very valuable. So I created a roadmap based largely on the model of American Express, who was a recent company in our industry that did this. What they lacked that we had was top-down support. So because our CEO was extremely not only supportive, it was his idea. He was constantly beating the drum of support, saying, "This is my strategy, this is my legacy, this is what I want to do, and everyone needs to follow." And that, I think, has been what's helped us accelerate the pace. But otherwise, we did what American Express did in terms of really deeply understanding customer needs, what's working well in our current experience and what's not, what needs to change most quickly and what needs to change longer term, and really driving a whole new business model around customer P&Ls and delivery of customer experiences at every channel for every group, and it's been fun.
And give us a before and after kind of example. I mean, what was something like, and then what did it change into after you went through this process?
Sure. So I was giving an example to some folks earlier. We used to have 12 million calls from customers and dentists a year to verify dental eligibility. So we looked at our 26 million dental calls, 12 million were around, is this person eligible for benefits? So we created an ID card. Seems very straightforward, right? But the business had always said it's too expensive to produce an ID card. Didn't look at the cost of actually handling those calls. And so we produced the ID card where you can get an actual card, you can print it yourself online, or you can use a mobile app to show your dentist your eligibility. Another quick example, we used to require for a life insurance claim that a customer find their original policy, a beneficiary. So someone who's just lost a family member has to find a copy of the original insurance policy, which no one can do. And as soon as they would call back, we would say, "Oh, that's fine." But we were doing this literally just, I think, to hold on to the money. I'm not sure why we were doing it, but we've looked at a number of those. Yeah,
there you go. You're going to get real honesty here.
I guess the video, I probably shouldn't have said that. But we looked at all the requirements that we put customers through for routine processes and discovered that many of them were way too arduous, and so we've streamlined that a lot.
Well, I know the customers will appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, I hope so.
So, Paula, one of the things that I think is interesting from your experience is the fact that you've got a pretty diverse audience of folks who are consuming the products, if you can call them products, that you've got. How do you get your mind around segmenting that audience? Do you segment that audience and say, okay, these folks want this, these folks want that? Are you that linear about it, or is it more kind of an overall approach?
Do you mean from a customer service perspective, or from a...
Yeah, or how you think about your customer. So yes, it impacts customer service, but also from a marketing point of view and from a communications point of view.
Well, I think with the way that the world is going, you can segment stakeholder groups less and less. So really, whatever your message is, you can't have one message for one group and another message for another. Or I remember when I was doing
lots of folks do, right? I mean,
right.
It's interesting that you say that, though. I mean, I agree with you. Although there's lots of companies that are doing exactly that. They're saying these guys want this message, these guys want that message. So it's interesting.
Exactly. Well, I mean, different people want different things, but when it comes to overarching messages about your brand or who you are or what you want to stand for or your values, then you've got there's really no difference anymore, I think. And in fact, from my perspective, because communications is categorized in different ways in different companies, but I think of my role as I kind of categorize it into internal comms, philanthropy and charities, and external comms and traditional PR. So we've got this kind of, I would have, my internal channels and my external channels, but now I'm starting to sort of develop a content engine that we've honed quite well on the internal side and just sort of replicate it externally, because there's just less and less difference in terms of what you're telling your internal audience and what your external audience.
Well, so let's dig into that a little bit. I mean, I think the relationship between the internal audience and the external audience is a really interesting topic that I know people struggle with because sometimes it's different people's responsibility to do, and sometimes it's the internal audience is underappreciated, right?
Well, sometimes internal comms reports into HR. Sometimes it reports straight into the CEO. So it can sometimes live in different places in a company.
And is it part of your responsibility in your role?
Yeah, so it's part of my responsibility at Dow Jones.
And it sounds like that's been a positive thing, a strength in your organization.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
All right. And one of the things that I know we talked about when we chatted was this difficulty when I don't know if it's necessarily, I don't want to put it as a difficulty, but you do have a lot of internal folks who are pretty gifted at creating stuff, creating content. And that is probably the opposite situation to a lot of people sitting in the audience who, struggle with getting their audience to produce anything that looks substantial in any way. So talk us through some of the challenges or positives of having an employee base like that who, are real professionals at doing this. Do they kind of not adhere to the rules maybe a little bit more because they kind of feel like they should be able to do what they want to do?
Well, it's interesting being a PR department, at a journalism company where, you're sort of talking to journalists about how to promote them and meanwhile they're being kind of slammed with, what they think are completely useless, irrelevant press releases from, stupid PR people like me. So, they often think that they can do it better than you. But, you just... With every role that you have, there's different challenges, different upsides, different downsides to your internal sort of stakeholder groups. And I think that, the great thing about them is that, they're brilliant at creating content, a really smart group of people. And, we can leverage that. Also there's a big kind of concerted effort to get them out on social platforms and them doing their own PR, and so that obviously helps me because they're doing my work for me.
So how specific do you have to be with things like guidelines, for example, or like rules or disciplining people? I mean, is it kind of a flexible atmosphere, or do you have to be pretty specific about like this is the line, and if you cross the line, then sorry, can't help you?
Yeah, it's really hard to be specific or to sort of have guidelines. I mean, just that word, makes people want to cry. But and I know in other companies, for instance, when it comes to being proactive on social platforms and having employees be proactive on social platforms. Some companies, and for instance, in the bank that I worked for prior, they just shut down the access to those platforms, and they come at it as, okay, well, it's a bit scary. We don't have control over this. Let's just avoid it and try and shut it down as much as possible. I think that we have no choice. That's going to be more and more important as time goes on. So we might as well embrace it now and figure out how to get it right. And really, you can just kind of lead by example. You can have a kind of PR comms infrastructure which is friendly and kind of sends the message of there to help. Rather than there to clamp down.
So how do you send that message? Because sometimes people are, they perceive things in different ways from PR teams.
Sure. Well, I have a management call every Wednesday, with the top 40 people in the company, and we all kind of go around and update each other. So, I sort of send messages through that channel about what my team are doing and how people can use my team. I also have somebody in every region who inserts themselves into the onboarding process for new employees and kind of talks through, some of the ways that we can help them. So we kind of try and get employees on their way in. And also it means that the employees are coming at it as like, okay, I haven't made a mistake on social yet. Okay, I haven't spoken to a journalist by accident or whatever. So they're probably less defensive. So, and if we can kind of create as many of those ambassadors through the firm that understand what comms is there to do and how we're there to help, we're trying to do that more and more.
Do you find that, just bringing it back to the customer centricity side of things, does social media help understand your customer? Does it help?
Absolutely. Okay. There's lots and lots of tools out there that can, help you to understand sentiment, where you're going wrong. We're trying really hard. We had to sort of figure out how we do customer service through social better than we are. I think very few companies, I'm not sure whether you would agree, very few companies are sort of, doing that really well today. But customer service is really important to Lex, to our CEO. Everybody sits open plan at Dow Jones, and he actually sits next to customer service. So he can when the volume increases, he just intuitively understands that there's a problem, or with the product. So yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And the theme that both of you have shared is this idea of having support from the top being really important to getting some of these initiatives to move forward. So I think that's interesting as well. Nikki, tell us a little bit about, when you think about customer centricity, what does that mean for Chobani?
Yeah, I think at the core of Chobani, what consistently grounds us is our own humanity. We're a group of people. 80% of our workforce works in a plant. So I think really thinking through the lens of a consumer, because we are all consumers. And in every facet of our company, from finance to HR to communications, which accounts for internal and external PR and digital, along with our customer loyalty team, what we can do to better service our customers. Everyone has the lens of the consumer on when they make decisions.
And is that something that people need to be taught, or is it something that people kind of naturally do and unlearn later?
I think we have the fortune of being a younger company. We were founded in 2007. Our products launched 2007. So we were born as a customer-centric company. We don't have to try and retrofit a customer-centric approach to what we do. It's just innate to us. And it was really put into the culture by our CEO, Hamdi, who, very similar to Lex, it sounds, lives and breathes by the consumer. Because without our fans and loyalty, there is no Chobani at the end of the day, no matter how great our product is or how robust our distribution is. And in the beginning, Hamdi sat with our customer loyalty team. It was a team of one. He answered phone calls in the beginning to get a sense of what people were saying about our brand. He called to stores when we first shipped product out to see how people were reacting with it, if they were buying more than one, if they were coming back for repeat purchase. And he went as far as to make sure that our entire executive team receives every single email from consumers coming into all of our iPhones and our BlackBerries. So we really have a sense of volume and sentiment. And if people don't like seeds in the pomegranate, we'll have a meeting and we'll heavily debate whether there should be seeds in the bottom of the pomegranate. And we did decide to keep them in. So, yeah.
That's good news for pomegranate seed lovers.
Yeah. The world over.
So, when you think about the idea of customer centricity, sometimes what you see is companies put that into certain categories. So one category is if someone has feedback for us, if they want to tell us something about our product, we're listening. Our door is always open, right? That mentality. But the next level of customer centricity is almost to take that customer approach and integrate it into the things that your company is uniquely doing. So, for example, new product development, things that are usually kind of behind the curtain, so to speak. So tell us a little bit, how involved do customers get in that other side of the curtain versus if you have a question, we'll answer it for you, which is one piece of customer centricity. The other piece is bringing the customers sort of into that process.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think inherent to the name of customer centricity, with the consumer at the center of our company, we have two large listening groups. One is our customer loyalty team, which is a group of 16 communicators that, through inbound loyalty of phones and emails, are the voice of the company. The title for our customer loyalty team, each of our reps are voice members, because they really are empowered to speak on our behalf. And then we have our online voices, so our digital team that is living and breathing across each of our channels, creating content and also taking inbound questions and complaints and fans and where should we get the product. We don't allow that data to just live in those groups. It's shared throughout the company. So to the other side of the curtain, our innovation team, much of their pipeline is driven by what we see online and what we're hearing from our fans. Simple examples like pomegranate, which was heavily suggested, to some of our newer innovations. We just released a product called Chobani Flip, which has a sidecar of crunchy mix-ins, and that was directly driven by the behavior we see from our very loyal fans on Pinterest. It's just the way that they consume our product. And so we knew that not everyone is going to be as apt to go to the steps of making gorgeous parfaits, but aspirationally they want to play there. So we gave them the product on shelf, and that insight was really garnered from listening to the consumer and allowing those insights to funnel deeper into the company.
And in a product like yours, you don't necessarily control the end-to-end process, right? I mean, you're putting the product into a store's hands that is delivering a piece of that customer experience that you really can't control. How much of a challenge is that, really, to be able to only take it up to a certain point and then have to let go?
Yeah. We try and control as much of the process as possible. I mean, from our distribution to our freight, because we want to ensure that the product is perfect when it arrives. But to that point, I mean, we can't own every single store in the country. And if you think about customer centricity, our customers are not only our consumers, they are our retail partners. So that same model extends deeply to all of our retailers. So it's through partnership and its connections online and in store. We have a dedicated sales team of 200 reps that really scour the country and not only work to make sure that things look nice on shelves, but get to know their store managers and their category buyers. Because we both want the same thing. We want customers who are shopping at stores to have great experiences. So it really is a relationship.
Justin, one of the things that we've sort of heard from multiple folks on the panel is this idea of evolution. And I know one of the things that you've spoken about is this digital maturity model, and how being customer-centric is a stage of evolution that sometimes people are in the midst of. Sometimes they might be in an organization that they're working towards. So what are the symbols of that path? How do you get from here to there, and what does that actually mean for folks?
Right. So I think there's, and Claire and I were talking about this earlier today, I think there has to be a top-down approach. I think you definitely have to have executives on board to say that this is going to be, there are going to be headaches. There's going to be a shift in the way you think about teams, right? So for a lot of our clients, it is a shift from thinking product-centric to customer segment. So literally dismantling some of their product teams and segmenting them out into customers. And that takes, a top-down approach. There's also a focus on the amount of resources it's going to take, the budget, all of those things that kind of laying that groundwork that this is going to be a lengthy process. I was in New Orleans last week and sat down with was talking to Matt Jacques, the CMO of Nationwide, and he said that it took them, who I would consider, I guess, on our scale at customer-centric, and have kind of achieved that. It took them 4 years, 6 data scientists, $100 million to get to a point where they felt like they had this customer-centric approach from a database perspective and all of that. So I think it's definitely a scaled approach where you focus on top-down approach, and then what are the resources and how can we maximize what we have right now to move forward.
So when you say it took them 4 years and $100 million, what did they end? Where did they end after that? I mean, because it sounds like a lot of money and a lot of time.
Right. Right, and I don't think that that's everyone's journey, right? I don't think that it's $100 million for everyone.
Anyone have $100 million to spend on that?
Exactly. I think where it ended was a seamless experience for the users that wasn't there before. So similar to the call situation, they saved in their first year $10 million on postage alone, just on wrong addresses, right? So So sometimes it's the problems that you have that just aren't. There isn't a seamless experience with your data and understanding. This customer Joe Smith is the same Joe Smith that called in last week with this issue, and then hit my website, and then opened an email, and then responded to someone on Twitter. To your point about customer service, sometimes it's laying that foundation. So for the model, kind of our tagline is laying the foundation for improvisation, right? So laying that groundwork to say that I have enough in place to know enough about my customers to be able to respond to them in the right amount of time, one, and two, in the right channel. And I think that was what they were just at a point where they weren't doing that, and it took that kind of overhaul. At least for our customers, for scaling the model, we've seen anywhere from 2 to 6 years. 6 years being the person who just has the, hey, look, we're a website model. And then, we've seen some people do it in 2 years that are pretty far up the model, have a solid CRM, have a solid set of folks creating content, to your point, and responding, and then they're just kind of, the data's siloed, so they're putting it together and being able to respond in a meaningful way.
So one of the biggest trends that I think a lot of people are talking about in marketing and communications today is the impact of big data and being able to collect all of this information and trying to make it work. And one of the trends alongside that is the fact that now you can plug into multiple places. So what I was thinking as you were describing that is, if you had started this 5 years ago, you're probably starting to get it right now. If you're starting today, is it still going to take you 6 years to figure this stuff out? Or is that process of what used to take 6 years now becoming easier because of the way data sets are structured and open APIs and things like that?
Right. So that's a great point. I think we talk a lot about this idea of minimum viable data. So what are the 3 to 4 pieces of information that you need about your customer to connect the dots? From, whether that's their email address, their first name, their zip code.
And you can guarantee one of them's not the fax number, right?
Right. Well, some of our clients maybe, right? But so we talk about that, to your point, right? Instead of kind of trying to tackle this mountain, what is the minimum viable pieces of data that you need to kind of connect that dot and start to get started? So that at least maybe the difference is now I call in customer service, and you at least understand that I sent an email 3 weeks ago. You may not know all of the content because you're just trying to get there, but at least I feel like you at least know who I am from a one-to-one perspective, and I have done some action with your brand, and you at least respect that. So I think at that point, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I was going to try and bring you into this as well, because I think there is this interesting dual side of customer centricity. One is culture, which is we're going to be an open culture. We're going to be friendly towards customers, which, God forbid that happens, right? For anyone. We're going to actually understand what they want. But then there's the data side of customers, which is the single view of customer model that, like, if somebody tweets or if they send us an email or if they call up, we should be smart enough to know that that's the same person. And right now we don't. And we need to figure that out from a technology point of view. So, in your role as Chief Customer Officer, like, contrast the cultural change versus the technological infrastructure that needs to be built. I mean, are they 50-50 or not?
That's a very good question. In terms of organizational energy, I would say they probably are 50-50 because it takes a lot of energy to move the culture, and it takes a lot of sort of will to be different. But at the same time, the investment and the time for a certain portion of the population focused on creating that single view of the customer is a huge commitment as well. I do believe that technology has gotten better and more malleable, and we actually were able to come to a much quicker solution using cloud technology to get at an approximation of a single view with those, what was your term, your expression? The minimally viable pieces of data. So we do now know when someone calls in if they hold multiple products and if they've communicated with us and if they've posted something on social media. So we do actually have that. We can't then help process everything for each of those products, but at least we can tell what they own. So the call center rep is much more empowered than they were before in terms of information, but there's still a lot of work and a huge effort that needs to happen so that we can connect the backstream system so that we can actually service it. But I would say from our perspective, the journey has been 50-50. So there's been a technology path that's had a lot of robust activity and gotten us to some meaningful progress. But the equally difficult and challenging is the culture journey and getting people waking up in the morning thinking about the customer. When I first started in my role, I had this agent, insurance agent named Art Steinberg, who sent me an email saying, "Your job is impossible I would never let any of my customers call a MetLife 800 number because that would be a disaster. There's no way you're going to fix this. And in the last couple of weeks, he sent a couple of emails, the same guy, to our CEO saying, I never thought this would happen, but I actually had someone in the annuity service center who took my customer through problem solving in a way that they actually fixed something, and it took 2 days instead of 8 calls in 2 months. And I mean, that's not me. I didn't do that, but we created the cultural underpinnings where people feel empowered to actually do the right thing and follow through the course of actually fixing things, which is, I think it's great. I don't think we're there, but where it's much progressed.
Well, I think you also raise an interesting point about the result and measurement side of being customer-centric, which is when you start to do that, because of how open these tools and platforms are, you can start to hear back about the results pretty quickly. Right. I mean, people will start tweeting about how they were impressed that their experience didn't stink in the way that they thought it might stink, right? Or they'll start to share that. Right?
My favorite tweet so far has been, I would rather have my teeth drilled with no Novocaine than get on the phone with MetLife Dental. That was a testament to our IVR, which you cannot, when we first started this journey, you could not reach a live person at all. It was just not even possible. So we haven't gotten any positive tweets about that yet, but we have fixed the endless cycle in the IVR, so I'm hoping.
Well, it's all progress, right?
Exactly.
It's all towards the right direction.
I agree.
So Paula, one of the things that we've sort of talked about is in this model of customer centricity and having the value of data, you can get a better understanding of your customer. In media companies, that better understanding of a customer can sometimes translate to being able to sell advertising in more effective, efficient ways. Yeah. And sometimes people like that, and sometimes they don't. So talk about that relationship between building better understandings of customers so that you can serve them better with your products, but also now having the ability to take that and turn it around and generate revenue off of it in a way.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly the idea, but media companies, as Bloomberg kindly illustrated, have to be very careful with how they're using customer data as well now. So, we are starting to understand much more about our customer, and that does enable us to be much more clever about our advertising, as you said. But I think the key challenge now for media companies is to really understand mobile advertising and to get better at that. So that's the plan right now.
So how are you doing that? Can you tell us? Is it a secret?
It's not a secret. It's a challenge. There are a number of different ways. I'm not in advertising, so I'm not a specialist about this. But there are a number of different ways, like programmatic buying and lots of kind of innovative things that they're doing with advertising now. But I think, like I said, I think everybody is really struggling with mobile.
Yeah. Well, and I think that this idea also of being customer centric, one of the if you asked anyone outside of us communications geeks what that meant, they'd say giving the customer what they want. And if you said, well, what they want is mobile advertising, you'd probably get shot in the face, right? And nobody wants that necessarily, or they think they don't want that. So part of the challenge is in that customer centricity, what are the right models for doing things that make sense for the business, but maybe don't necessarily fit the narrow view of just give the customer whatever they want and don't worry about making any money on it.
Right? Well, one thing that we're trying to do more and more with journal customers, especially online, is make WSJ into more of a community rather than just a newspaper. So it's much more than a place where you just go to read the news. And we've developed a number of different tools in that sense. There's a new tool called Portfolio, whereby you can load all your 401ks or any other brokerage accounts that you have, and it will aggregate that portfolio. You can see how your portfolio is doing against other people's portfolios, and we will also then serve you the news that is relevant to that portfolio. So often you don't know what's in your, huge mutual fund, but actually it turns out that across all of your brokerage accounts, you own, 60% Apple shares. So you'll see the news that pertain to the individual assets in your portfolio. There's another feature of WSJ.com which we're developing, which is, profile and instant chat. So you can, you'll be able to find people, if you're, if you're an advisor and you want to kind of find potential, high net worth targets, then, you can kind of search for that on WSJ.com, and you can then instant chat with them. So, we're trying to develop it to develop more of a community. So that ultimately serves the customer, and that's a reason to input your information into Profile to make you searchable. Maybe you are looking for your next job, so actually this, WSJ would be a great place to load your information if you're in the financial sector specifically, so that maybe recruiters can kind of pick you up more easily. So I think, to your question, that's one thing that the customer gets out of adding his or her information. We're trying to build that community. So that's sort of nothing to do with advertising and all to do with what the customer can get out of it.
Well, and it shows what you're sort of coming back to is that you have to show that the value of what they've shared with you before they'll see that there's the upside for them as opposed to
Absolutely.
Okay, interesting. Nikki, one of the things that I think is interesting for you is this question of the relationship between the marketing and communications function and the customer care group. In your organization, it might be a little bit more closely linked, but I know that a lot of folks in the audience, those are two very separate groups that probably, in some cases are in completely different regions of the country or the world. They certainly don't sit next to each other. Like Paula, you mentioned the CEO sitting next to the customer care team. I mean, in some organizations out there, they're not talking to each other yearly. Maybe they might talk to each other. So what advice could you offer them beyond the put everybody together kind of model, which does work but may not be possible for some folks?
Yeah. I think Paula said this earlier, but I think it's different in every company. I don't think there is a right answer. And when we were really trying to figure out what our formula for success was as it pertains to organizational structure, we looked around at a lot of brands that we admire, a lot of brands that have been in business for a long time, world-class marketing, world-class comms, and we couldn't find one approach. So it really does need to be individualized. The one thing that we know is that our consumer is king. So we've tried to build our department so that that voice can always rise to the top and that we can work in a stream that is allowing us to put out the best work for our consumers. So in my role, I oversee digital communications, internal and external comms, and then the customer loyalty team, and work very closely with our marketing team, which includes upstream insights and advertising. I will say that it is an art, not a science, unlike CRM data. It's a lot of relationships. It's a lot of going back and forth. And as close as we are, and I do think our system works really well, it is a lot of checks and balances and communicating, and there's a lot of gray that we are continually navigating through. And I think that's true to wherever you work. I mean, I don't think there is a perfect structure that exists, especially as channels become more integrated, lines become more blurred, messaging becomes more seamless. It's going to continue to get gray. So I just think it takes increased collaboration, increased thought.
Mm-hmm. And Justin, I mean, in your work with presumably multiple groups, are there indicators for you that an organization is either ready to start doing this or not ready to start doing this? And how do they get to that point?
Yeah, I think there's some indicators. I think going back to that point a little bit about the collaboration piece, that's a big indicator. How one is marketing communications, how are they talking, and then how is marketing and IT talking, and what does that look like? Kind of laying the foundation. A story that I tell a lot that I'm sure everyone's familiar with is the Nordstrom Story from 1975. A guy walks into a Nordstrom outpost in Alaska and says, "I want to return tires." and Nordstrom's takes the tires back, right? Nordstrom doesn't sell tires, definitely didn't sell this guy tires, right? So a lot of people kind of say, well, very, very customer-centric idea. I argue that's a customer-friendly idea unless two things. One, either he is it's a publicity stunt, or two, he spends $10,000 a month at Nordstrom's. And so what we look for a lot is the integration between that sales point. Does that person know that piece of information? Does he come there a lot? Or is it part of, to your point, a CRM system or something in the back end that says, look, this guy that just brought tires back is our best customer, not only our best customer in Alaska where this was, but our best customer nationally. And so we look for that a lot, and then look for opportunities to create programs internally that get people that are at the touch point, customer service folks, sales folks, to give that information and to allow that seamless passing of information. So those are some of the things we look for early on. Are there opportunities there? Are there a lot of people kind of walled up to the idea of moving down this path?
Well, one of the things that raises for me also is this sense of the growth of the squeaky wheel customer, right? The person who's figured out that instead of calling the 800 number, they can just be really cranky on Twitter and somebody will get back to them.
Right.
And so now they're sort of creating their own workaround in the system to be cranky on purpose so that they get stuff done.
Right.
Is that consumer behavior? I mean, are we encouraging that consumer behavior by putting ourselves into this customer-centric model where the customer can always get service no matter how cranky or idiotic they might be?
Right. So I think there for some companies there needs to be a clear distinction on how much you spend on certain types of customers. And that may be kind of a taboo thing to say, but these are my most valuable set of customers, and I should expend more energy on them. And that doesn't mean you forget about your other customers. I'm not advocating that in any way, shape, or form, but that if they are a better customer and their lifetime value to your firm is much larger, then maybe I should focus a little bit more on them than the next person. Do I think that we are creating an environment? Probably. My generation and the generation after us that wants everything we want now, and we don't care who gives it to us. And it's a problem for brands going forward, is that you have to deliver those things in the right way. But I think it's when you focus on customer centricity, especially from a data and organizational perspective, you can start to say that, well, I know this person is more valuable, so I can expend this energy, and then all of my other efforts for my other customers should be able to retain them at a lower cost. If we kind of have the foundation set up, like you said, from a customer service perspective. So,
Nikki, are there VIP yogurt customers? I mean, are there people that you've segmented? I mean, it's not I'm sort of asking seriously. Like, do you have that sense of this person buys a ton of yogurt and therefore they're going to get something that maybe somebody else doesn't get?
I would say our system's probably a little bit more democratized than that, but we definitely do have loyalists that we see whether they come through our service center more often, or especially, I think, the digital space. It's easier to pin those people. Our price point in our product is $1.29 as opposed to some higher-end services, so I think it's a little bit different. However, we do have loyal advocates. We actually call them Chobaniacs online. We have a deep network of 600 people, which are really brand advocates and scream about us from the mountain. And if someone does complain or say something negative on one of our social sites, we have such a beautiful community that we don't need to traffic it. Our fans are going to come and do it for us. They have such a deep love and passion for the brand, and it's those kind of people that we put our focus on. But still the golden rule that we treat everybody the way we'd want to be treated. But some people do get a definite more attention because we just have deeper relationships built with them.
And what about the haters? I mean, there's always haters out there. How do you deal with those people? Do you have a do not engage if they're particularly hateful kind of mentality, or do you kind of say, sorry, you're unhappy, but we make yogurt?
Yeah. I think the mantra of our company, why we were founded, is we believe people have really great taste. They just need good options, right? So our vision is to bring people good options. And as long as people have access to those, whether they choose to enjoy them or not is really up to them. So we have clear community guidelines. Anyone can join in and share their viewpoint, and as long as it is not explicit or disrespectful to other people in our community, it really is an open place. So we do poke the bear. We make sure that we engage with everybody. But again, I think you can overdo it. So if there is someone that is just there to be negative, which exists everywhere, they can do it. We just don't overly engage.
Okay, interesting. Claire, what about when it comes to the way that you're interacting with customers and this idea of knowing your VIP customers, and in your case, probably people who are purchasing certain products maybe that are higher value versus lower value products. Do you kind of make those distinctions, and do they go to different teams? I mean, how's that handled?
We do make those distinctions in some markets. In the U.S. market, most of our business is group business, so it's B2B, and we do treat different institutional sponsors differently. But the individual customer, it doesn't mean much to us economically if someone participates in 3 products versus 2 or 1. So the individual consumer or participant in a group plan, there's not a huge difference in value to us. It's much more the institutional sponsor. But in some markets where we do have a high net worth strategy, like the Asian markets in particular, we do very much segment and predict the lifetime value of the customer and focus a lot more attention and energy on those with a higher lifetime value. In the U.S., in the individual market, we're actually the only company that's targeting the lower end of the market. Because if you think about insurance in the U.S., it's 1% growth per year, and people just do a little bit of switching. There's not a lot of new customers, but there's one sort of large uninsured base in life insurance, and that's people who work full-time but don't have benefits at work and just don't have the discretionary income. So we're actually creating products that target them. We actually are selling insurance in a box on the shelves of Walmart, trying to democratize our product and get it out there. And so we're less about the lifetime value in this country and more about broadening the exposure and uptake of the brand.
It's interesting. I haven't seen it in Walmart. I'll have to go and check it out.
It's only in Florida and South Carolina right now, but it'll go big.
It'll eventually be everywhere.
Yes, yeah. I hope.
Okay. Paula, when it comes to looking at this from your point of view, one of the things that I know we talked about was the inside-out approach of connecting individuals, and you've got amazing individuals with customers, and people having an affinity maybe for a person or following an individual, and that transcends to then the brand. But really, the reason that they're paying for their subscription is to read from that one person. One of the things that's interesting for me is that making the connection between those two things. Is that purely a virtual thing, or how much do you use like actual real life types of customer-centric events, moments in time where things like this, for example? I mean, I know that there's, in the media industry, there's lots of moments like that. There's conferences, there's meet and greets, there's lunches, there's all those sorts of things. We focused a lot on social media and the online world, but part of being customer-centric has got to be having some face-to-face moments.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just as I mentioned that, with WSJ.com, we're trying to create this community. We're also trying to, create a series of high-end events that are for our subscriber community, whereby, subscribers do have exclusive access to come and see, their favorite journalists on a panel talking about, I don't know what, but, we had a series in Bryant Park over the summer. So, we're certainly trying to do that. I think one of the interesting developments for media companies or for news companies is that journalists are becoming more of their own powerful brands. And, we saw that example with Nate Silver leaving the Times. I mean, the idea that these are kind of actually, this is something that's sort of not in the company's control so much anymore. That's something that we all need to think about. And, of course, again, it's like these individual brands then have access to your external stakeholder groups. Like if David Wessel has, 600,000 followers on Twitter and he then goes to work for a different brand, he takes all of those with him. So, we kind of have to think of ourselves now as an umbrella brand for all those individual brands and move forward with our plans with that as a given.
That is an interesting challenge because you've got these individual personal brands of these folks, and they're sort of laddering up to something. Yeah, it's a tough thing to have to deal with that. So that's interesting. Just a reminder for all of you, we've got maybe about 10 or 15 minutes left in this session. If you have a question that you'd like to ask the panel, we do have some roving mics, and we'll open it up in maybe a couple minutes. Also, if there's insights that they've been sharing that you think are interesting, please do share those on Twitter. Use the hashtag. That way people will be able to find it afterwards. The folks on the panel will be able to see it afterwards and connect with you directly. And everybody in the room will think you're really smart. So please do that. All right. So one of the questions, I'm trying to make sure we've covered all of our promised questions here. We don't stick to the agenda necessarily, but we will cover the things that we said we were going to cover. So, one of the things that we did want to talk about is this idea of anticipating the future. And one of the values of being a customer-centric organization is presumably you have a better sense of what people will want in the future, and so you can project forwards what products should we offer, what sorts of things should we do. Nikki, you talked about that a little bit in terms of your product. Paula and Claire and Justin, I'm wondering if maybe you guys can share a little bit about that business planning side of being customer-centric, especially as we start to move into 2014. Probably some folks are starting to feel that pressure to put together their plans for the next year and what they're going to focus on. I think that's probably on people's minds. So, Claire, maybe you can start with that.
Sure, absolutely. So for us, it's two. Our program has always been sort of twofold. One is fixing experiences that we have today that aren't working, and then the other is trying to innovate and create new positive experiences. And that aspect of it is really trying to innovate and think about what customers are going to want next. And in an industry that's 145 years old, there's it's not that exciting. But what we've done is we've gotten a community panel. It's called a customer community that we use on Communispace as our vendor, and we regularly tap into this group of customers for their insights about all kinds of different activities that we're thinking about. So whether it's we're changing a form so that it's going to be more customer friendly and asking them for their insights, or we're asking them what the next product idea might be. It's extremely helpful, and so we're using them to drive a lot of our planning. And what they are telling us, and it's not surprising, is that we're not friendly enough or simple enough in our language, and they're helping us reinvent the language of insurance in a way that's simple and accessible to people. So a lot of the insights we're getting about what customers want and need are coming from that panel. And one of the things that they've talked about, or one of the ideas that they've generated is, buying insurance should be as easy as buying a loaf of bread, which is how we got to the Walmart idea. Mm-hmm. But it also should be as easy as going on Amazon and checking a menu. I want to protect my identity. I want to protect my children. I want to protect my dog. I want to protect my car, my house, mm-hmm. whatever, and having a price point associated with that. So we're looking at the future of insurance being that simple. So we're constantly challenging ourselves to think about what the future may hold and how we can be consumer friendly.
So Amazon's next.
You said it, not me.
Okay. Paula, how about you?
You asked about long-term business plans and how customer centricity, how we use our customer-centric culture to feed into that. We are very iterative when it comes to our product development and our strategic plans. We believe that perfect is the enemy of fast and of progress, sometimes of constant progress. So one thing that we've tried to do with our customer service teams is make them a sort of real-time market research function. So we have this thing called Question of the Week. And any of the executives or anybody in the company can submit questions to customer service, things that they want to know about our customers. So one really obvious thing is for me, for example, when you read the Wall Street Journal, are you reading for business, for pleasure, or for both? And, I get back the answer, that essentially 90% of people are reading just for pleasure or for business and pleasure. So that therefore tells me that I need to really surface much more of our newer content that's, like the art stuff, the real estate stuff, what I call our non-core content through my broadcast channels, which is getting journalists on TV and radio, which we do a huge amount. So I know that I need to get more and more of our journalists that cover those subjects. that newer content on TV and radio and promote that content, because that really is the stickier content, especially if I know that 90% of customers are reading for business and pleasure or just pleasure. So kind of a longish story there, but it's just an example of putting that capability to really understand customers into your business strategy, but rather than in a kind of long-term view way, just in a kind of constantly iterating way and just constantly improving your plans. So that's one way that I use that data, but the head of customers, the head of marketing might have a different question that she needs to know, or head of technology, or whoever else. So that's just one of the ways.
Okay. Justin, do you want to add anything to
that?
Yeah,
just to piggyback on that, I mean, we take mostly a crawl, walk, run approach with our clients for this, and we kind of put into a 4-step hierarchy model. Your strategic goals at the top, so that may be sales through education or lead gen or whatever it is. What are the insights that you need to inform those goals? What is the data that you need to inform those insights? And then what are the data sources that you have that can inform that data? And so the idea of taking that from a crawl, walk, run is, what do you have now? What can we work with to get started from a business planning standpoint for the next, call it 12, 24 months, and kind of work through that model and build out an insights chart that says, we know this about our customers. Here's our wish list of things we wish we knew about our customers, and here's the places that we can go find that data, and then ultimately then we grab kind of the messaging and the communications team and say, well, if you knew this, what would you say, right? What would be your response? And that's how we kind of like map it out. It seems to be a decent approach so far that's easy at least to understand in a pretty complicated environment.
Okay. Well, I think the conversation's touched on a lot of the different topics that we wanted to. I do want to give the audience a chance to ask questions. I'm not sure if we have a mic over here, and do we have one in back as well? Okay. Maybe we can take one question if we have one. Yeah, right in front here.
Fascinating stuff, and I'm curious from all of your points of view. Why now? Why is if you look back 20 years, or I can look back 100 years. Why is this part of communications growing as opposed to handling the latest scandal of the who knew the executive was doing it kind of stuff? Or is it just digital enablement? Is the customer really getting more powerful? And we've had LL Bean in our minds for a long time. Why is it coming up so much now?
Interesting. Anyone want to start off and offer a point of view? I mean, what's different? What's different today? I guess you're asking.
I think the digital space has definitely increased the cadence of customer centricity and the importance of it. I mean, our founder says all the time that today's world is flat. Anybody can do anything. You can be somebody in Atlanta, Georgia, and tweet and become a sensation all of a sudden, right? And so for a company, empowering people to be a part of your brand and to engage with them, I think is critical, because consumers really do make or break you. I mean, I was at another conference last year, and someone was speaking about specifically to the CPG world and the food industry that 20 years ago, shelves were dominated by manufacturers. 10 years ago, they were really controlled by the retailer, and today it's the consumer in power who's deciding what's on shelf. So I just think consumer centricity is critical.
I agree. I think transparency is just everything's much more transparent, and all of our customers know how other customers are feeling. And whereas before we would care much more about the CEO of a company who was an institutional sponsor, now your next door neighbor is just as important, because they're screaming on social media, or if they are, we take that as seriously as we did the comments of the CEO previously. So it's really, I agree completely. It's a flat, and we need to care about everyone. In our industry, it's stickiness that matters, loyalty. Customers switch all the time, so we want to keep them. We want to keep them excited about coming back and staying with our products.
I think it's also, it's the competitive landscape. If you think of any company today that's successful, they have a customer service culture of excellence, and consumers have choices. And, this generation of consumers feels absolutely entitled to a fantastic customer experience and feels very grateful for it. So, if you can't deliver that as a company, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, and I think just last to touch on the data piece, I think the ecosystem for collecting data is there now. And so part of it with big data being kind of a buzzword out there, it's, well, we can actually go grab this so we can learn more about our customers. And I think that's enticing for brands and for companies to say, okay, I can learn more about my customer without having to bring all of them in a room and ask them pointed questions, right? We can learn about them as they navigate our brand digitally and somewhat anonymously, right? And that can inform, kind of all of these things from a communication standpoint.
Okay, I think that was a great question. We probably need to chop it up. One question in the back. We can squeeze it in? Yes? Okay. I saw the hand further back first.
You guys just started touching on customer loyalty and building brand loyalty, which we didn't exactly cover in this session, although it's been very informative. So when it comes to building that loyalty, what are the extra measures that you can take, not only to satisfy customers, but actually keep them coming back, and then, ultimately turning them into advocates or whatever it may be?
So moving to customer loyalty, Nikki, I noticed you called the team customer loyalty as opposed to customer care. So
it all comes down to experience. Our team operates on what we call, and I'm sure a lot of companies internally call it, a very high-touch model. I can use our customer loyalty team as a point of example. So we receive anywhere from 8,000 to 10,000 inbound messages per month, whether it's phones or email, not taking into account our digital channels. Of those, 82% receive some sort of outbound form of loyalty, whether it is a handwritten note from one of our reps, a follow-up phone call if they didn't have a good experience, sending coupons, sending a t-shirt, things to surprise and delight and just offer an extra point of wow. We operate off of slightly different metrics, so I don't ask any of our voice team their efficiency models or how many calls they were able to get through in a day. We really look at the follow-up. How many people called about our yogurt and then called back to compliment our service? That's how we judge, and that's how we give bonuses and raises. And I think it's that extra step of people saying, wow, this is a brand that I not only love their products, but I love their company and their approach, and I love that I'm now a part of them. That, to me, is brand loyalness, and that's that layer of stickiness, and we follow the same thing in our digital channels.
Okay. One other person want to offer any thought on loyalty?
Go ahead. Okay. We use a metric called Net Promoter Score, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, but it really measures a customer's likelihood to recommend. And with any product, it's a little bit different. Like I have a 17-year-old daughter who probably Instagrams pictures of your yogurt in a parfait to her friends, and that's a different form of loyalty that's over the top. We don't get that. But we do get people who might recommend MetLife to others. They might say, I had a flood or a fire, and they came and they took care of my home, and they did it in a new and different way. And to get to where they're going to recommend, you need to deliver an experience that is based on not hitting efficiency standards. It is hitting a different level. And for us, it's about caring at a person's moment of need and really creating an experience that is, sure, it has to be efficient and it has to hit the mark in terms of our contracts and everything, but it also has to demonstrate a level of caring. So we, too, write handwritten notes and send out stuffed Snoopies and do things like that for people who are in times of need. And it seems silly or almost trivializing, but the response we get from customers is just amazing because those little touches really help. As long as you also pay the claim, which is part of what we do as well. But loyalty is huge.
Yeah, I think there's probably very little a stuffed Snoopy to not do.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great place to end. You actually have to care. That's a great way to think about being customer-centric. I'd like to thank the panel. We're going to take a very quick break while we do our little bit of changeover, but let's give them a hand.